Hey everybody, welcome back to new videos channel. Today we talk about the very polarizing topic, auto imports. But before, let's celebrate because it's my birthday. There are quite some polarizing topics in the web development world, right? Luckily not that many in the Vue community itself, but there's definitely one which is auto import. There are big proponents and big opponents of auto imports. And we talk about a little bit in this video what they are, how to configure them, what the pros and cons might be, my recommendation, when to use them and how, and of course how you can disable them in your Nuxt projects, or also how you can bring them into your non-Nuxt projects to get the functionalities that Nuxt would bring you in your Vue projects. Nevertheless, before we get started, let's talk a little bit about Vue.js Amsterdam, which is coming up on March 12th to March 14th. It's a 2-day, and with JS World, a 3-day event with a lot of amazing speakers, Avenue in person again. Of course, a lot of people from the Nuxt and Vue core team, like Daniel, Sebastian, Puya, and so on and so on. And of course, we also have amazing speakers over there from the broader JavaScript ecosystem. We see the results of State of JS, which is, by the way, still running. So I think today's the last day. Filled out if you didn't already. And mention your favorite frameworks, content creators, and so on and so on. But nevertheless, with the ticket code Lichter, with my last name, you get 10% discount for the conference. So I hope to see you there, have a chat, and it would be great if you would join us. But yeah, now back to auto imports. Because if we talk about auto imports, what is actually meant? Well, we'll jump into our demo application in a second, but you can kind of split it up into 3 big topics. You can say auto import of components, so like Vue components. This goes back all the way, I think, to Nuxt 2, where there was an option for it to say, let's auto import all the components based on your folder structure. The other thing is files, so actual functions, actual exports from files like in your composables folder, utility folder, the shared folder, and so on and so on. And of course, you can also customize all of that. And the third one is kind of third-party packages, modules hooking into that, saying, okay, Nuxt modules can define their own auto imports. That's maybe a topic for another video, but it's possible. And it's not even that difficult. Or you setting up, okay, let's add certain exports from other NPM packages, so outside of your code. In Nuxt, that already happens by saying, okay, let's import all the types, all the exports from the Vue package itself, like a ref, so you don't have to do that. Let's check out how it looks like and then talk a little bit about the pros and cons of it, and jump then into customizability. Of course, our Nuxt application is not as minimal as possible, but almost, right? We have our Nuxt config, nothing in here to set. That's very lovely. And we have an app folder here because we used the compat version already. So in your Nuxt 3 projects, this would not be an app folder, but all top level. And we have components and composables. We'll come to that in our app.vue here, just rendering a very simple hey. And of course, if we check in the browser, we exactly get that. We get a very simple hey. Nice. So from here, let's say we have some components. So let's say we have my component A, and it just renders my component A, no content in here, nothing. If we want to use that in our app.vue, for example, of course, we could say import my component A, and luckily our editor will complete that. Nice. And then we can just say my component A. And that fully works, right? So if we actually look in the browser, then we see that, we see, hey, in my component A. But luckily, thanks to auto imports, we can even say, you know what, let's get rid of the whole thing and save this. And you see there are no errors in the IDE. Everything still works. And also in the browser, we're good. Great. Nice. Kind of, right? So even if we hover over here, we get the right type. So if my component A would have required properties, we still get the errors, right? Our IDE will still tell us if there's something missing. We don't lose out on that. That's also a little bit different back then where auto imports worked, but not with full TypeScript support. While here we have that, which is pretty amazing. And the same also works for components and folders. So we have here an app folder, and there we have component B. So now we can write app component, and it's already auto-completing, of course, app component B here. So the auto-imported name and the component name is really based on where it exactly is. That allows you to create nested folder components the same way as you would have just very, very long component names in your components folder and have it all flat. That's also, in a way, pretty neat. So you don't have to do that all manually by saying, oh yeah, we import, and then you don't want component B, but you want app component B from components app component B. That's a bit, a bit verbose, I would say. And especially if you have a lot of lines for a lot of components here, this will also get pretty noisy, right? It's like so many imports, it's hard to read, and As an example, I always like to pull up the example from actually the composition API RFC. This is a plain Vue component which Evan refactored the composition API, was the options API before, right? You know, the lovely screenshot with the different colors for the logical blocks. This is the component. I already mentioned that in another video about the composition API. And here we have quite some imports, right? Like almost 20 lines of imports. And ideally, well, do we really need to import, well, ref, reactive? I don't know. I mean, we all know that ref is part of Vue, so why not auto import that and save us the line because we know what it is from, right? And to me, these auto imports, well, they would just resolve removing all of that. But the best part is we can quickly do this in our Nuxt application with, let's say, a custom composable. So let's just remove this line because it also works without, right? And we have a composable that I prepared. So let's say we have use this file and we can just write use this file. And here we see, oh, okay, this even needs an input in here to be used. We get, once again, all the benefits of it. And if we check it out, clicking here, then, yeah, here we go. It brings us, sadly, to the Nuxt types import ETS. But luckily, thanks to an extension from Anthony Fu, we can even jump straight away into the right file by default. I just disabled that for the video, for the showcase. So we even get to the right definition. That's one of the downsides of auto imports, I would say, especially in Nuxt context. But nevertheless, we get here with that extension, can jump there, and we see all definitions, what the file's doing. Right now, of course, not much because it's just a demo example, but we get also all the benefits here. And of course, the error because we don't pass in a string. So we can say, I don't know, ref, empty string, and it's fine. And now you might wonder, okay, yes, we know that we can hover over it so we know what it's used from. That's great. So it's pretty flexible. And we can, of course, do the same with all the other custom composables, with things like use fetch, use async data that come from Nuxt just by default. But of course, we also can import them the manual way. That's up to us. But that also means that we save a lot of lines up here, as we've just seen before. So that's pretty good. But what if we don't have composables in here? Or maybe we can do another example in my-comp.ts. So we have this export here, use my composable. Of course, this also works. You can write use my composable and we're good to go. Same idea. This time it doesn't need anything. It's just empty, just for exemplary reasons. But what if we say, okay, we want to auto import things besides Vue, besides Nuxt specific parts? Well, then of course we can configure that. We can customize what exactly we want to import, either from NPM packages or even from different folders. Because right now we have the composables folders. Also, as I said before, util shared folder, they also have some auto import capabilities. But if we say, I don't know, we have a logic folder, a data folder, services folder, you can also customize that. I made a whole video on that, so link to that. We don't have to cover that here necessarily. So the setup is pretty straightforward, and that's pretty amazing. Now let's talk a bit more about the downsides, because I think the pros are clear. It's less boilerplate. It's very readable, right? And the signal to noise ratio is better than with all these lines, especially when it comes to components, right? But the problem is really if you have a big application with a lot of things. So I mean, not the default ones like use fetch, use async data, or also some other functionalities like ref, like watch. We all know these belong to Vue, these belong to Nuxt, and they come from there. It's rather straightforward. But what if you have a lot of own composables? Because here, yeah, okay, use this file. You can probably find it by clicking on it. But also, okay, that's named the same way. Use my composable, you'd have to click on it. Otherwise, you don't know where it is. In this case, okay, we know that it's in my-comp.ts, but well, people being onboarded, you wouldn't know it. And what if you then use maybe, I don't know, a component library that provides own composables, Vue use, which provides own composables, and so on, so on, so on. So you have a lot of implicit behavior, and that's kind of tricky, obviously, because then onboarding is difficult, reading code is difficult. At least more difficult with auto imports, the bigger it gets. And there's, of course, another thing. So let's say we go to use this file here, and we would rename this file to use this other file, right? So let's rename this real quick. And we see, oh, this breaks, cannot find use this file, because obviously it's based on the file name. We can close the imports here, that's fine. And I have to fix that manually. Thanks to TypeScript, that's not a problem. But what if I say I rename this here to use my composable, so use my composable 2. Please, of course, never do that, but you get that. The same problem. Like, the refactoring, well, at least we get errors thanks to TypeScript. We have to manually fix that. But we don't get the benefits of saying, okay, if we would now import it automatically. So let's say import use my composable 2 from here, right? And we would just say like, okay, let's rename this to my composable again. It can be fixed automatically thanks to, well, VS Code IDE capabilities. So the problem there is really that VS Code is not as good as, oh, you changed that file, let me update everything, because there is no clear link there based on how it's implemented. That's a bit unfortunate. So it would be really good to have these improvements, because I think besides the implicit behavior and having a harder time to read very long pieces of code, the refactoring, well, there's something I hope the tooling gets a little bit better. But it's also based on how it's implemented, because behind the auto imports, there's a library which powers all of them. This library is called Unimport. It's really the baseline when it comes to all kind of auto importing APIs. And it's not only tied to Vue, which is great. You can use it in any kind of project in the end. And the idea is, thanks to different ways, either walking the AST, for example, or regex-based strategies, we can set up imports from packages like Vue or React, which will be simply injected when it's being used or found. So in a way that can help a lot, especially with common things like, yeah, Lodash, Vue, React, and so on, so on. And as mentioned, you can also customize it. Unimport is used under the hood also in Nuxt, so you will find some of the options you've seen here in your Nuxt config, for example, setting up directories where you want to import from, or even the just shown array with the certain patterns that you can set up. And unplugin is pretty amazing. Of course, the thing is that unplugin is not integrated in VS Code in a way, right? Like VS Code might not be aware of that at all. So either there might be a custom extension needed to get all the power out there, or some other tricks. Definitely something to explore, but not for that video. Nevertheless, now we talked about unplugin. So if you don't have a Nuxt application where all these auto imports that we've just seen are built in, what can you do? Well, of course, you can use unplugin yourself. But now you might wonder, okay, this works from imports from Vue, okay, so like actual functions, variables, and so on, so on. But what's with components? Well, actually, there are two things about it. And there are two solutions, both thanks to unplugin. The first one is called unplugin Vue components, and unplugin is a lovely system, which means this can be used no matter which kind of bundler you use. That's pretty amazing. So yeah, it's supporting Vite, Webpack, RSPack, Vue CLI, Rollup, and so on, so on. So in all kind of projects, amazing. Thanks to the unplugin project. So definitely also worth checking that out and making sure if you build some kind of plugin for a build tool, then using unplugin and making sure that's just available everywhere thanks to APIs. Really worth checking out if you're interested in these things. Nevertheless, thanks to unplugin Vue components, you can actually get these auto importing component features in your Vue application. And it's used by quite a few people, so installing that will already help you straight away. Installing and then setting it up based on whatever you use, right? In Nuxt, like, haha, you're done. You could use Nuxt components. This was a thing back then. Now it's implemented in the core, so we're good. And you can straight away just use it instead of importing, because it will be just injected eventually. And of course, customization from which directories and so on are also fully possible. Same thing for your variables. We just said unimport. Yeah, using that wouldn't be a problem, but there's even an easier way. And it's called unplugin auto import. Once again, another unplugin. And of course, it uses unimport straight away. So it's also on demand. Not a problem at all. It's all set up. You don't have to make sure this is really set up nicely with your build tool, because this unplugin will do it for you. And then you can set up which file should be included, where it should be checked. The presets for example, Vue can be set up, some custom things. Here are all the unimport options, and you're good to go. You can even ignore stuff or say, hey, all the exports. There's a long list of things that you can do here to put them in your own Vue project. And if you are a big fan of auto imports, so say, hey, at least the Vue stuff, we don't need that, that's fine. So now you might wonder, okay, we can add them into our Vue projects. How to disable them in Nuxt.js? Being someone might be like, yeah, the cons outweigh it. I want my refactors to behave nicely. Maybe someone who's not necessarily using TypeScript even, because then, well, there are other issues around that, right? So how to disable them? And once again, we have to think in three categories here. First, everything from like Vue, Nuxt, and so on, the components, and our auto imports from our own code, from like composables, utils, and so on. So let's go through step by step how to disable them nicely in Nuxt.js. right now it works already. Before disabling things step by step, we also want to make sure that we use all three types, and we do. We have something from Vue here. We have our composable, well, that's not auto-imported, but this one is, and we have our components. So the first thing, what we want to do is we go into our Nuxt config and we use the imports key here. And of course, what we want to set first is we want to disable everything from our composables folder and utils folder, so our own code. We can do that by setting scan to false. This will allow us to not use any auto imports for our own code, but what will still work in the end is things from Nuxt or Vue. So ref, all fine. But use this other file, yeah, can't find it anymore, it's broken. So we have to say import, use this other file. And because it's a default export, we have to, well, manually set it up. And this will work again. Of course, just to double check that our application is still up, we quickly have a look into the browser and we see that everything is still good. So going back in one more step, if we also say, yeah, you know what, let's remove every auto import possible, also the ones from Vue and Nuxt, we go back to our Nuxt config, and here we set auto import to false. We can even remove the scan in this case because, well, this should cover really everything from module contributor utilities and so on. So on. You could also leave both on. That's fine. If we set that, then also ref is gone. Luckily here we can just import it straight away from Vue. But what's with the components, huh? Yeah, the components are still there. And wait, oh, now also our use this other file breaks because here we imported the type ref straight away. So that's also another thing which might break on purpose if you disable all of that, right? So, and now to also stop auto importing our components, we create the components object if it's not there already, and then we set the directories, so directories that should be scanned for auto imports, just to an empty array. And that's it. If we now check our app.vue, we see my component A, my component B, they are unknown now, right? So they don't give TypeScript errors in that way because they could still be custom elements whatsoever, right? And they're not shown in our browser. So when you do this, make sure you really, well, you don't break stuff accidentally. So what we'd have to do as before, we'd have to import them. So say import my component A. If we import the my component A, of course, this will show up again. And if we then also import the good old app component B, or just import component B here and put app in front, then this also works as before. Lovely. And if you want an easier way also to make sure that nothing breaks, then there is even a solution from Anthony Fu, who's actually also a fan of auto imports. And he wrote a little module in extension of the Nuxt ESLint module. It's called Nuxt ESLint auto explicit import. And the idea is to make sure, okay, you want more implicitness, nice, install that module, and straight away you'll get insertions for every auto import by default. So that should help. First of all, migrating away or just making sure that you don't use any imports. And the best part is he also had a commit where he applied the whole thing. And here you see, oh yeah, things are automatically imported wherever they were automatically imported. So it's nicely and inserted. We see the changes, and that's definitely worth looking into, especially if you want to get rid of the auto imports. So now that we know how to change things around, let's talk a little bit about the future, because of course there were discussions, and there is, for example, an issue all around Nitro, where Puya, who is obviously the lead of AnJS and also Nitro project, eventually had a big discussion with the community also about how exactly auto imports should look like in the end. And the end result would be making auto imports an opt-in feature for Nitro projects. For Nuxt, we will see. So let's not make them vanish. Obviously, if you have auto imports right now, that's great. You can still use them, but you're not forced to use them, or maybe this is not the first way you're pushed into. In a way, I kind of get it, especially in Nitro with like, okay, you have Nuxt and Nitro and H3, and a lot of people don't even know what H3 is and how they all work together. It would give them a bit more, oh, that part comes from there, this from here, a better feeling, and also where to look in terms of documentation. For Nuxt, I also think, well, relying less on auto imports could be helpful, but that's already the case, right? For example, in your composables and utils folder, only the top level is actually auto-imported, not nested features. And, well, here also comes a bit of my own take on that. Auto-imports, for me personally, I think they're great. The only downside is if you really overuse them. So auto-imports for everything that's obvious that you're like, oh yeah, I don't need to write ref, or also for components, it's a no-brainer, because for components with the right strategy, you know exactly where they are. And also from everything from Nuxt or from Vue, it's also pretty clear. But as soon as you auto-import every tiny detail and you have tons of auto-imports and you don't know where things come from anymore, it can become a little bit of a pain. And to solve that, it's pretty simple. Just use it with caution and for the things where you think like, okay, people know that. But not from maybe your senior mind, but like someone is new to the whole project. Does that person know where to look for things? For some composables, sure. For like maybe something super custom, might be more tricky. For ref or watch, yeah, not a big deal. So also there, it doesn't hurt to think a bit what makes sense in terms of auto imports and whatnot, to maybe also save you some pain later on, especially for onboarding new developers, right? Or for onboarding yourself a week after you wrote your own code. Nevertheless, I'm curious, what's your take out there? Are you a big fan of auto imports? Would you prefer not to have them at all? Write down in the comments, and also with reasoning, maybe you have some more arguments or feedback besides what I just listed. So I'll be super curious to hear. And other than that, of course, take a look at the new Stage Review episode, very important, under all the videos. And now it's time to celebrate, I guess. So have a lovely weekend and catch you all soon. Happy hacking.